today we have visiting with us students from region number 2. The visit was arranged by the honorable member, Mr. Damon. Students are from the Parliamentary Secondary School. The 8th of May Secondary School. Members, we will proceed to resolve ourselves into the Committee of Supply to consider the estimates of expenditure for the year 2013. 1 second, please. Mr. Sam Downs. 1 second. I have noted that on Friday afternoon, as the clerk advised, that Mr. Ramjatan, the honourable member, has submitted a list of proposed amendments to these estimates. And I have noted as well the position articulated by the Honorable Attorney General and others before and after Friday. And by way of perhaps gaining some assistance from the House, I would wish to be advised whether or not, Mr. Ramjatan, will you be proceeding to ask us also consider these amendments?
That is correct, Mr. Speaker. I will be. And as the procedure is, and as we did last year, it would largely be asking certain questions. And although they are merely proposed cuts for which there is this parliamentary requirement of a 24 hours notice, I want to tell the House that and the satisfaction of the Alliance for changes to the answers given, we will then decide whether the cuts be made or not. It is just like what happened last time. Or if they reach a certain threshold.
What I needed to find is whether or not you were proceeding to have the House with your motion.
Yes.
Yes. Is there any formal objection to the motion coming before the House? And I ask this because if there is going to be an objection, I would wish to have arguments presented on it. So if we anticipate that there's going to be an objection based on all that I've read and heard, I anticipate that there is going to be an objection. I would not wish us to start the estimates, and when we get to a particular point, we stop, have arguments, and then resume. And I prefer to deal with these issues at the beginning so that we know clearly one way or the other where we stand. I needed some guidance as to whether or not there is likely to be a formal objection to the motion being before this House.
Yes, sir, there will be.
5 minutes ago, I believe the clerk just came into the office as well. I received a letter from the honourable member, Mr. Carl Greenwich, which letter, to be frank, I have not had a chance to even read and consider. But I believe that it pertains to the procedures that we intend to adopt within the go ahead, please. Or whether we need to deal with it orally rather than
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for receiving this letter. In essence, Mr. Speaker, you will recall that we have had, in terms of substance, motions followed by resolutions, as well as 3 bills presented before this House on the question of the treatment of constitutional officers and the requirements of Article 222A of the Constitution. In this letter, I'm drawing to your attention the fact that the estimates as currently formulated are not consistent with the requirements of 222A, Article 222A of the Constitution. More specifically, the estimates as presented to us do not allow us to approve for a number of entities, the most important of which, if I might get into this, would be the courts, as mentioned in the Annex 3A to Article 222A, which requires the schedule 3, sorry. And you recall that that schedule requires that the provisions for the specified agencies be set out in the estimates as lump sum payments on an annual basis. Just to say to you one more point, that is that for the Office of the Auditor General and for the Ethnic Relations Commission, the Ministry of Finance, in setting out the estimates, conform to the requirements of the Constitution. It's not clear as to why none of the others have that characteristic. So in view of that, we want to suggest that this particular matter be considered at another time, with the Minister having made the requisite amendments. The details of the objection are certainly here, but as far as I'm concerned, the estimates for these agencies, service commissions, the courts, and so forth are not properly before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, would you have an objection to me sharing your letter with the government? Because I think your time to make a response.
Not at all, Mr.
Honourable members, in view of the notification by Mr. Ramstan that he intends to continue to have his motion considered by the House, and in view of the fact that the Honourable Attorney General has one second. Sorry. The government's position that they will be formally or intend to formally object to the motion being properly before this House for reasons that will be advanced. I propose that we entertain arguments as to whether or not the House can entertain the motion in the name of Mr. Ramstan before we begin consideration of the estimate, because that motion will have an effect on all on how we proceed with the estimates. That is my proposition, that we do so at the earliest possible time, which is now. I don't know whether members need time to prepare, but I would wish to have this commence today.
I suspect that if my motion is being objected to, we would like to hear arguments. The Attorney General ought to start the arguments as to why it should not be allowed.
So I have a slightly different, that the court has already ruled, and as a matter of public notoriety, that the National Assembly has no power to amend or cut the estimates. And therefore, there is still a motion notwithstanding that to cut the estimate. And therefore, sir, I believe that Your Honor should invite my friend to show how in face of the court ruling, that it is still permissible for the National Assembly to entertain the motion. It is his motion. He has to prosecute his motion. Whatever objections I have will come after he has to present his motion and convince us of the propriety of the motion. It's not automatic that any motion presented in the Assembly is proper.
Thank you. Honourable members, yes, a court has made a ruling, but I don't believe that it should interrupt the government in terms of how we do things. I would prefer, Mr. Ramstan, for you to address us first as to the basis on which your motion is before the House. I don't know if the APNU intends to be, or wishes to be heard, and I would, one second, Mr. Williams. what I'm thinking is that in the interest of time, I wouldn't want to limit the debate, but if I could have an indication from the whips perhaps, how many members would wish to speak. But I was thinking 2 members from each party. But if there's a request for more, of course I would entertain it. But I was thinking of 2 members from each party, and then I'd like to give those arguments from. I would like to give those arguments some consideration.
Mr. Speaker, I hope to address you on the earlier point. As you are aware, the deal people elected to school. We're going to put motion, and when we put a motion, who wants to object? They would have to take their objection. It means that the Honorable Attorney General has to start his submissions to his Honorable. Exactly, sir. Let me reject out the plan. And I'm happy now that I have him on record in this Honorable House saying.
We understand the arguments now.
No, sir. I'm rejecting his contention that the Honorable Chief Justice rules that you cannot cut in this House in the items of expenditure.
Well, honorable members, we are entering into again unprecedented, uncharted water. I have benefits that I would need Mr. Rambutan, even though it may not be comfortable, that may not be comfortable with everyone. Mr. Rambutan to not open in terms of saying that his motion is there, why it should be entertained, and then I think we will go in that order. If you were to start the consideration of the estimates and then wait for a formal objection, it may be sometime. I prefer us to clear this early, because quite frankly, despite or apart from all of those who are gathered here today, the nation is waiting and needs some direction, one way or the other, where we are going. So it's not just a matter of those of us seated here. And so I prefer to have this matter dealt with early and upfront so that the parties and the nation may have a sense to formally address me on this motion that is before the House.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to degut the National Assembly of that right is literally to take away the heart if we were to compare the National Assembly to a human being. It is what gives the National Assembly that power of scrutiny, of supervision of the public money. And what we had is a provisional judgment of Honorable Chief Justice Mr. Chang, though in the context of a variety of interpretations. I urge you as Mr. Speaker here to come to the conclusion that notwithstanding certain interpretations given to his ruling that we cannot cut, that indeed we can. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution of Guyana gives us that right. And I refer to the material and relevant portion of Article 218 of the Constitution. It provides, let's get to you, it provides, I have some notes here, the minister responsible for finance or any other minister designated by the president shall cause to be prepared and laid before the National Assembly before or within 90 days the financial estimates and all of that. When the estimates of expenditure have been approved by the National Assembly, a bill to be known as an appropriation bill shall be introduced in the Assembly, providing for the issue from the consolidated fund of the sums necessary to meet those expenditures. We have 2 points here, Mr. Speaker. First, after laying his estimates in the National Assembly, the Minister of Finance seeks the approval of that assembly. And generally, the approval comes with a motion that he has laid before us that he would like to see $208 billion be expended for the year 2013. We have a motion to that effect here, laid with his budget speech. And secondly, he has to come also for support from this National Assembly for what is called the appropriation bill to be approved so that that expenditure can then be spent. It will, of course, go toward an assent to the President. But what we have as a ruling from the Attorney, well, the submissions, first of all, from the Attorney General, and then a provisional ruling, and I use the word provisional ruling because it has never been made final, and the Attorney General would like us to be bound by that, is that the argument goes thus, that the National Assembly, by the words approved in the Constitution, the National Assembly is being told in the form of submissions by the Attorney General can only approve or disapprove. It can't reduce or amend or alter the expenditures. Well, I am saying, I'm making the submission here, Mr. Speaker, that that is totally flawed. This power to approve obviously must mean to amend. It is strange that we in the National Assembly, it is being argued by the Honorable Attorney General, can disapprove all $208 billion of expenditure. We can approve all, but we can't reduce even by $1. That has to be a most notorious interpretation of our Constitution. And to conceive of that kind of argument is nothing more reckless and misconceived. But I want to bring to the attention of the Honorable this National Assembly that our Constitution provides that any member can seek a reduction of the expenditures and the estimates. Article 171(2) of the Constitution provides this. Except on the recommendation or with the consent of the Cabinet signified by a minister, the Assembly shall not proceed upon any bill which in the opinion of a person presiding makes provision for the following purposes. 1, well, that does not apply. 2, for imposing any charge upon the consolidated fund or any other public fund of Guyana, or for altering any such charge, and these are the very significant words, otherwise than by reducing it. Otherwise than by reducing it. And what that is saying, clearly, that only for the increase of it, you have to have a cabinet minister doing that. So if we wanted to increase the budgetary allocations from 208 billion to 280 billion, you got to come from over there, some minister. But if for imposing any charge upon the consolidated fund or any other public fund, or for altering any such charge otherwise than by reducing it, it has to come, and it can come from any member. The Constitution is clear. And this article was not addressed in the learned Chief Justice decision. Provisional decision. Moreover, Article 171(2)B talks about a motion that must be brought here. That motion was brought here. And in the Committee of Supply, we have that committee having the power to make revisions thereon, once, of course, and I will come just now to what if I notice of what the amendments should be. I want to state that in this Parliament we are governed by certain standing orders. And the standing orders state very clearly what we can do in relation to amending a budget. But before I go to the standing orders, sir, I want to indicate what the practice is in England, because it's from England that we got our practice in relation to budget and alterations thereof. And it is clear in parliamentary practice Mays, the one that we have now. I had an older edition and I had quoted and pulled from the older edition, that this is what chapters 26 and 27 of the 21st edition that I have states. Firstly, that it is the executive branch which demands money and the House of Commons that grants it. The executive branch demands money that grants it. Similarly here, the Minister of Finance demands $208 million. This National Assembly that has to grant it. And I want to make it quite clear, as Erskine May makes it clear, the point must be made that this does not mean that what is demanded must necessarily be granted. And this is where the Honorable Attorney General and the learned Chief Justice err. Two, that a charge on the consolidated fund must be first considered in the form of a resolution or a motion. This is what Erskine May is saying. And when agreed to by the House of Commons in its Committee of Supply stage, then that charge could be authorized through an appropriation act. That is exactly the position here. When the learned Minister of Finance indicated that my motion here is to seek 208 expenditure, he was doing exactly like what happens in England. And so it is a rule that expenditure then must be authorized by this resolution or motion that we have, and then later on by that appropriation bill that will soon come to the House. Thirdly, in England the practice continues. The contents of the estimates is designed to correspond to a variety of programs coming under a particular government department, each of which is subdivided into subheads. That is exactly what we have here. This very thick book, 3 volumes of them, all under some subhead, agencies, and line items. And what you do in relation to each in the Committee of Supply stage is that you approve, you revise, or you can disapprove of them. That's that upon the voting at the individual estimate, if an amendment is to be carried, the subsequent question will be put by the chair, that is you, Mr. Speaker, and then you can ask the question once, of course, there is the need for a cut to be made. But of course, again, we have to do the proposed cuts 24 hours notice and all. Now that is in accordance with HR. And generally, the Committee of Supply will see the Minister making the report to the National Assembly that the Committee of Supply has gone through the estimates, and let's say there are cuts like last year we did, he will then report that there has been cuts and it is now an estimate that is as amended. Last year, that is what was said, and I'm absolutely certain that this year it is also going to be said. as amended, depending on if we don't get the answers and we have to do the cuts. So it is important to understand that it is this Committee of Supply that will then make the report to the National Assembly, which is the same thing, stating whether indeed we have an amended estimates or not. Now, the practice in Guyana is also similar to England by virtue of what we have placed in the Financial Management and Accountability Act, FMAA. And also, Mr. Speaker, what are certain other articles of the Constitution, like Article 217, which says, by this Constitution or by any act of Parliament. And it goes on in sub-articles 2, 3, and 4. Parliament may then prescribe the manner in which withdrawals may be made from the consolidated fund or any public fund. All these articles give quite clearly, because Parliament means the National Assembly and the President. They're saying that Parliament has the power to do all these things. And an integral Parliament is this National Assembly. So if all these articles are giving Parliament, or even the word National Assembly is used, then it obviously means that we in this National Assembly have the power to make these cuts or amendments or alterations, which is a better term to use. But I want to go now, Mr. Speaker, to our standing orders, which surprisingly was held by the Speaker as not being law, by the Chief Justice, sir, by the Chief Justice, as not being law. Well, as I have argued before that learned attorney, Chief Justice, it is but the law of Parliament, that special branch called Lex Parliamentary. Of course, I didn't see in this decision anything mentioned about it again. But the law of this Parliament is governed by the standing orders. And the financial procedures are stated quite clearly in clause 71 and thereafter. This is very important, Mr. Speaker, because this is what 71 says, estimates of expenditure. Standing Order 71. The estimates of revenues and expenditure for a financial year shall be laid over before the Assembly by a minister, and so on, within that certain time period. And then, after signifying the recommendation or the consent of the Cabinet, may, without notice, move a motion for the approval of the estimates of expenditure. Such motion shall be on the occasion of the minister making his budget speech. We had that, and we had the budget speech in print, and attached therein was the motion of Minister Singh. After the motion has been proposed, the debate shall be adjourned to a day later, and that, of course, we did already. So it is very much in keeping with what we have done so far. And this is the very important one under Standing Order 71. Standing Order 71, 5. The motion for the approval of the estimates in that Committee of Supply shall be amended if necessary and put without further debate as moved, as amended, as the case may be. That is what it says. 71, Standing Order 71 says that that motion that the minister has brought here shall be amended. The motion that he's brought here is that he spends $208 million. We have the power under the standing orders to make it clear that we can amend if necessary and put without further debate as moved or as amended as the case may be. estimates of Committee of Supply, this is what 76.1 says. Just to give the significance of the argument that we can propose amendments. 76.1 says this, Mr. Speaker. No amendment shall be moved in the Committee of Supply under this standing order until 1 day after that on which it was published in the notice paper. No amendment to this motion, that is, that they spent 208, shall be moved in the Committee of Supply under this standing order until 1 day after that in which it was published. So it is conceptualizing amendments. But the amendments must come when we give a 24-hour notice. It could not be that it never contemplated that we have to either approve or disapprove. We can amend. And look what 76.4 says. An amendment to any head of expenditure to reduce the sum allocated thereto in respect of any line item therein may be moved by any member and shall take the form of a motion that that head is to be reduced by this sum, by leaving out that sum, and there is what is called some blanks. That is what our check 76 today. It has it quite clear. It even in our standing orders, it got the blanks as to how you will fill them up. Take a look at it. 76.4. An amendment to any head of expenditure to read allotted in respect of any item therein may be moved by any member. I am not a minister, I am any member here. And I have asked to reduce it. I have given that 24 hours notice. And I am going to state in relation to the line items, as I have done, how much we want it reduced by. And we can do it because it is in accordance with the standing order. Mr. Speaker, there can be no clearer position from any reading of these standing orders that reductions were contemplated by the Committee of Supply. What I also want to state is that it is explicitly stated in our Constitution, in our Financial Management and Accountability Act, and moreover, in our standing orders. I have here, Mr. Speaker, the suggestion, as I started off with, that if we are to gut this National Assembly of that power, that authority, we are literally going to make this National Assembly de minimis. And we must never allow this. This power of National Assemblies, especially taken out of Westminster democracies, was a power that saw, first of all, huge fights in England 400 years ago between the king and the parliamentarians. And if anybody were to read Tudor's constitutional history, they will come to the realization that to become parliament, it had to have this power of supervision over the public's purse. To take away that power then is to denude us of the entirety of the powers that we have to ensure government money are spent properly. It is the people's money, and the people's representative is that first authority to ensure that it is spent properly. Mr. Speaker, I am going to give the arguments, if you would like to have it, because I was more or less quoting from the extended arguments that I had written out. But it is quite clearly the position that this Parliament, this National Assembly, has that power. I want to make this point because it is very important that in matters to do with financial revisions and so on, when parliamentarians are going to vote, very many people out there might very well feel that, you know what they did was wrong. It was politically immoral what they do. Cut, let's say, drainage and irrigation or CJI or whatever. Or specialty hospital. They might very well feel that way. But whatever they feel, the authority to revise...
Let's avoid the political arguments
That's very
and focus on the legal or the procedural. People will talk.
Yes, that's right. And that must not then be the ad terrorem argument to hold that we can't talk. That was the point I was trying to make. Oh, because it is this and that and whatever. We must not do that. We are the final authority here. And this kind of controversy then ought to be determined that way. But there's a very important thing that I wish to mention to this Honorable House. And it is coming from the Honorable Finance Minister when he rebutted largely what I was saying last year with a set of remarks he made. Now we are talking about an extremely qualified person. I understand that he got good, fantastic A grades and all of that in his accountancy degree and this and there's absolutely no way he would not know that we can make our reductions here. He knows it. And on the 17th of April last year, 2012, this is what he said. Over the next 6 days, and I'm quoting him from the Hansard.
You could give the number, because I may have to have a copy of that.
It is Hansard, part 2 of the 12th sitting, Tuesday, 17th of April, 2012. And he had started sometime at 3:04. I will give you a copy, Mr. Speaker. This is what he said. Honorable members brandish numbers as they pluck out of thin air even when they deliberately and otherwise multiply them incorrectly, to brandish the imaginary scissors in the air as if to drive fear in anyone. That was his introduction there before he came to the important point. And then he goes on to say, over the next 6 days, we will be considering the national estimates. And it is the legitimate right of the opposition to ask any questions it wishes within the standing orders in relation to those numbers. It is indeed the legitimate right of the opposition to propose any change within the boundaries of the standing orders. He said that. To any of those numbers. That is what he said. It is the legitimate right of the opposition to propose any change within the boundaries of the standing orders to any of those numbers. We in the People's Progressive Party Civic will always defend that right. Our laws provide for it. Our laws provide for it. Our standing orders provide for it. And we will defend that right. That is what he was saying. Last year, I want to give him a lot But I will say this. So he was conceding that we have that right, Mr. Speaker.
The honorable member.
The honorable member, sir. Yeah. That right shall have to be wielded and exercised responsibly because the people of Guyana are watching. So it is in the contemplation of even the Minister of Finance, bright person as he is,
with all the readings that he has done, that indeed we can cut. Indeed we can make our amendments. And we agree with him that we are not going to be wieldy and irresponsible. No, we are going to be very rational like we were last year. And it is important that what he is asking us to be, that we will provide that. But I want it to be known that in this Parliament, this Honourable Minister did concede, rightfully, that we have the authority to reduce amendments, reduce and amend.